Thank you very much for joining us. We're joined here now by John, who's the COO of Coadjute, who will be speaking about where blockchain is being used in the UK property market. They've been working with R3 Corda blockchain and with the UK Land Reg, and are going to be talking to us about how they're using blockchain and what the latest is for digitizing and digitally connecting the UK's property industry. So super excited to hear this one. The UK property industry is always a popular subject. So John, thank you very, very much for joining us to speak.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts on real estate and blockchain. Really delighted to be here at the Crypto Curry Club. So that's super. So thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be here, and thanks for taking some time out of your afternoon to spend half an hour with me and Erica talking about real estate and blockchain. I thought I'd sort of cover off 5 areas. So I thought it'd be worth sharing with you a little bit about my background and the background of Coadjute. We'll talk about digitally connecting the UK property market. So I wanted to talk a little bit about connectivity and what that means to me and what I think about when I think about connectivity. I want to dive in a little bit to the real estate market in the UK, maybe touch a bit global, but primarily in the UK. And I then want to talk about why DLT, as part of the tech stack for transforming the marketplace, is a very interesting technology. And then maybe wrap up a little bit on why now. Why is now a great time to innovate, digitize, and transform? So yeah, start off with a little bit of background about me and the company. So I've spent my whole life, 20 years plus in enterprise IT. I've worked for organizations like Fujitsu, Dell, Lockheed Martin, and all that time I've been really helping those businesses to sort of run faster internally and doing digital transformation. And in 2016, I was sort of start trading cryptocurrency, and that was really just really as a hobby, just messing around. But I found it really fascinating, this concept of digital uniqueness, having this thing that was a digital token or a thing that was unique that I could transfer to somebody else. And up to that point, you think about a PDF, you send it to somebody, and you don't know if they've sent it. If I send it to you, you don't know if I've sent it to another 5 or 10 people, and you don't know if I've tampered with that. So the thought of something digitally unique was really exciting to me. And it was exciting because I'd spent my whole life doing transformation projects, which was really all about creating that single source of truth within an organization. And I'll come on to that more when I talk about connectivity. So we started thinking about, well, how much you use this technology to join up government. Government got all these different departments and all these different databases and data sets, but they're never really synchronized. As a citizen, when you engage with government, if you're moving home, you have to let DVLA know, and you have to let the NHS know, and you have to let the tax office know. And so that concept of, could we somehow use a sort of digital backbone for government to keep these data sets in sync? That was the idea that became sort of quite excited, and we started doing research on. And we looked at all the kind of public platforms like the Ethereum network. And whilst that was really exciting technology, the thought of being able to put government data on there, we really didn't see how we would be able to make that work. So we started looking at the permissioned platforms, and the ones that people on this call will know, Corda, Hyperledger, multi-chain, etc. And after a kind of detailed piece of research, we settled on the Corda platform built by R3, and at that time it was particularly strong. It still is, but at that time around the privacy, confidentiality, and the way it could flow. And it's built for banks to go into production. So that was kind of the back end of 2017. And then in 2018, the UK Land Registry was the first government department to look for a supplier to help them explore how DLT could make the home buying process simpler, faster, and cheaper. So we worked with R3 and we bid for that project, and we won. And that really meant we had the privilege of working with the Land Registry, but not only the Land Registry had built what they call the Digital Street Community, which is a group of estate agents, conveyancers, property software companies, proptechs, that were really all coalescing around this idea of, the property market doesn't work very well. How might we work together? How might we collaborate to make the home buying process, as I said, simpler, faster, and cheaper? So we built a bunch of POCs using distributed ledger really as a backbone to help participants in a property transaction share information and collaborate on that transaction, basically crunch the time and speed up the transaction. And I mean, that was a super experience. That was 2018. The Land Registry have also been really clear that they are not going to build, commercial applications for the marketplace. They run the register. They do an awesome job of that. But all of this upstream, that was Digital Street, was about leaning forward and catalyzing industry innovation. So at that point, we pivoted and we became a product business because we realized nobody was actually, building this digital backbone. And we ran a global trial. We deployed 40 to 50 nodes into 22 countries around the world, and we created very much in a laboratory kind of POC environment. We created this global property market, and it's some really cool graphics from it. And you see the sort of lawyer in Australia, the bank in America, the estate agent in London, and all these kind of global transactions going on. But there was a serious side to the project. It was sort of exploring technology, but there was also actually seeing, is there an appetite within these businesses to come together and work together? And these are businesses that can be competitors, competing estate agents, competing conveyancers, competing banks, to work together on this digital backbone. What that project really proved was that the problem is a global problem, and the appetite for fixing it is in everybody's interest. Everybody wins, by creating and digitizing marketplaces. So that was the global trial, and we went on from that last year. We did a UK pilot, so we kind of took the global POC, we zoomed in on a UK pilot, and we connected up software along the property value chain to be able to do a digital transaction. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But that's who we are. We're an enterprise software company. We're based in London, and our mission is digitally connecting the UK property market. So I want to talk a little bit about connectivity and what do we understand by connectivity. And for me personally, I can't really separate my thoughts about connectivity from my thoughts around, at my experience with the PC or now my telephone. When I think back to my first computer, it was a sort of ZX Spectrum, the one with the squishy keys. And I know you put in a cassette tape and you load a game. It would probably take 20 minutes or so to load, and sometimes it would fail and you'd have to sort of restart it again. And if I think today about an Xbox, the Xbox is connected, it's online, and I can play games with anyone around the world, and I can exchange value, and it's it's an amazing experience. So we know in the last 20 years, we've had this amazing transformation of connectivity. But if we kind of go back to that time of that kind of the first PC, and then I think about school, and I haven't gone back, and I was going to go back ahead of this and just timestamp all the things, but I haven't done that. But I remember at school you had these banks of PCs. You could go on and you could do your thing, but they weren't connected. They didn't speak to each other. And kind of the next iteration, maybe it was more kind of the university days. You could go into the computer department and there would be PCs, and they'd be connected to each other on a LAN, but they wouldn't all be connected to the internet. And I certainly have memories of internet PCs being these PCs in the corner that you had to book onto. It was all on queue to book onto them. And so PCs actually became connected, and they became connected within the organization on a sort of LAN within the organization, and they became connected between organizations. But anybody who started a sort of job in the sort of late 80s, 90s, we think about the onboarding process for an employee. And you realize that whilst the PCs were connected, the applications that ran the business were not connected. And just to sort of give you a simple example of what it felt like sort of joining a company in the sort of early 90s as it were. So you'd often turn up, on day one, you turn up and say, oh, sorry, we don't have your PC ready. It'll be ready next week or the week after. So, you could have a week without a PC. Your payroll on your first payroll could often be late, or depending when you joined, or we missed it because you didn't fill in the paperwork on time, or it takes so long to do it. Your security badge, wouldn't be ready. And then once you did get your PC, you go on, but you couldn't do anything because they hadn't set you up with access to, application A or application B and all the rest of it. And I know there used to be a lot of frustration in companies. They used to think, well, if only HR would sort themselves out, if only IT would sort themselves out, the world would be so much better. But of course, we now know that under the hood and what was really going on, it wasn't that people were being delinquent. It wasn't that the HR or the IT or the finance people were maliciously being delinquent to frustrate new joiners to the business. The systems didn't talk to each other. So what would happen is a hiring manager would, offer someone a job, great, and then they'd have to go and they'd have to let the HR department know. And the HR department then literally have to fill in a form and either email it or bring it down to the IT department to say this person is starting on this date. And then they have to let payroll know. So what you have is you have a process of these applications which finance, payroll, all the different systems in the business don't talk to each other. So of course that's changed now, and applications within businesses over the last 20 years, and I've spent a lot of my time doing this, have been connected up to each other. So, if you join a business now, it's a push button. And the low-level tasks, when the HR system will tell the finance system, he's starting on this date, who they are. That will inform facilities and the security system. That will inform IT. That will inform their PC provider, etc. So these things, all these low-level workflows, don't rely on human intervention. They just happen. Businesses are optimized, and that's just the way they run. But when you think about then a business talking to a business, two separate entities talking to each other, well, kind of where we were 20 years ago. It feels very much like the new joiner process 20 years ago, because what happens is if you're using a finance system, state-of-the-art finance system, and you want to send an invoice to someone, you download it, attach it to an email and send it. Or with majority of inter-organizational communication, we rely on telephone and email. So the summary of this sort of connectivity piece there is, I think within the organization, we've radically transformed, but both the connectivity layer and the application integration and connectivity. In between the organizations, not a lot has really changed over the last 20 years. So I want to go on now and just talk a little bit about the UK, and just probably everyone on this call is really familiar with it. I'm sure everybody's bought and sold a house, but just so we've all got a kind of a level set, as it were, and a shared view, I'm just going to talk about the UK property market from three dimensions. I want to talk about it from the buyers and sellers perspective. And I want to talk about it then from the business perspective, but then I also want to talk about it from the system perspective. So if we think about sort of buying and selling a home, so let's start with the seller. So I want to sell my house, so I'll go and find an estate agent, and they'll go around and they'll take some details on the phone, how we do it. But ultimately, where that record ends up is within their operational software, within that estate agency. And they will set up a record, and for John, they'll take my property, my offer, all the rest of it. And then that data will then be uploaded to one of the portals. And those operational systems within the agencies have direct links to Rightmove and the portal. So they'll upload it to the portal. Now the seller is coming along, and the seller comes along and they go onto the portal, they go, I like that property, I want to view it. And they'll contact the estate agent. So what the estate agent will then do will key into their operational software, and they'll create a record for the seller. So for buyer. So let's say the buyer, I'm selling the house, and Erica's buying the house. So now the system's got two records. So far so good. That's pretty simple. One system, two people, and two records. Then Erica thinks, well, okay, I need a mortgage, so that's important. So goes and speaks to the broker. And the broker will then ask Erica for pretty much the same set of details. They'll set up a record on their system, and they'll get all their information again. By now, Erica's a bit frustrated, and I've already given that twice, but hey ho, I'll give it again. Now what's beginning to happen is, of course, I've got my PC at home that's got a record on it, because I'm managing and monitoring things, and Erica's got her PC at home. So we're beginning to see the fragmentation of the process across different systems. The broker will then send the application through to the lender, and the lender will be contacting and dealing with Verica and the broker. So now we've got another system that's got a record on it. The estate agent will then say to me, we need a conveyancer. So I'll go and get a conveyancer, and the conveyancer will do exactly the same. They've got their operational software. And remember, these software have been put in over the last sort of 15 years or so. And what they're for is they're for digitizing the work practice within the business. The actual setup of the case, the completion of the sale, the finances, and all of these systems are set up to do that. So the conveyancer will go through and do the same thing again. So now you've got, and then Erica will need a conveyancer as well. So what you end up with is you end up with 4, 5, 6, 7 different operational systems holding a record of the sale. But of course, these systems aren't synchronized. They don't talk to each other. So how do we keep them in sync? We keep them in sync by phoning and emailing around to find out what's going on with that particular process. And because the systems don't talk to each other in real time, and they're always out of sync. And what that feels like from a buyer's and seller's perspective is, you never feel like you've really got your finger on the truth. Because all the systems are a little bit out of sync. You're never really quite sure where you are in this process. And this process that you've never done before, it's a big deal for you. And you suddenly have to start phoning around. Now, whilst you're phoning around, what you're really doing is you're creating cost for the individual businesses. Now, conveyancers will tell you that they can spend up to 50% of their time just dealing with all the incoming phone calls, effectively project managing that kind of life cycle. Estate agents will tell you the same thing, that they spend a huge amount of time doing what they call sales progression, phoning around, trying to keep the deal moving forward. Because remember, they don't get paid unless the deal closes. And it is really stressful for the buyer and seller. And in some respects, it's akin to what it was joining a company in the early sort of 90s, where you turn up, your new company, you want to make an impression, you don't have your kit, you don't have access to any of the systems, you don't really know anyone. And you don't know what's going on. So you end up phoning up IT and phoning up HR and phoning up payroll and trying to find out what's going on. And that's within the company. So that's been solved within the company. It hasn't been solved in the marketplace. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. We're trying to connect up the UK property market to enable the software that runs the property market to connect, and so that it can connect and users can then interact and transact. And so I'll move on to sort of the next piece, which is really around why is distributed ledger, an important technology. And I suppose I'll start off by saying that, you could solve this by just building one monolithic application for the property market and say everybody just use this e-conveyancing estate agency brokerage thing, and then we will all be in sync and everything will work swimmingly. And for the same reason that, one of the same reasons that, we didn't build one single monolithic application to run marketing, finance, payroll, facilities, IT, we had best in breed applications that we connected up to run organizations. But more than that, in the UK property market, there are estate agents, conveyancers, brokers who all have their operational software. Many of them have them for 10, 15 years. Their businesses are built around these software. They're not going to rip out all of their operational software and move to this sort of monolithic platform. So the reason that DLT, I think, has a part to play is because the data can stay within the platforms or in the control of the platform owners. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that first, but maybe just to back up and talk a little bit about the two use cases that we are really seeing with enterprise IT, and then I'll tell you, which one we're focusing on. So we're seeing that there are really two strong emerging use cases. You've got tokenization and digital currencies, that kind of transfer of value. And then you've got this workflow, trade finance, supply chains, workflow optimization, keeping the software that run marketplaces in sync. I think they're the two prominent use cases that we're seeing. Now, undoubtedly over time, you will get the tokenization, the value exchange projects, putting the workflow wrap around it, and you'll get the workflow applications putting in that digital currency within the application. But what we're focused on is providing a sort of digital backbone. And the reason that we find DLT is a key part of our tech stack is that our customers are lenders and software vendors. And what they value is they value their data and their customer relationships. So what we're not trying to do is create another portal or another platform. So with our customers who are software vendors that we've got awesome relationships with, what we're saying to them is that you provide this operational software for your customers, and you can make that operational software do more. You can make that operational software turn from the kind of standalone PC to the connected one that is able to interact and transact with the other operational software in the marketplace. Now, these software providers are competing, but there's a very strong appetite for them to come together because they know that for their customers and for the end consumer and for the market as a whole, it's going to make a massive difference. So DLT enables us to leave the data at the boundaries on the nodes next to the software vendors, but allow people to exchange messages. So what Coadjute do is we've got our data model and our open APIs and the network that allows these different software vendors to come together and interoperate. And of course, any one of them could go and say, well, you know what, we're going to go and set up 100 different API connections and manage those. But they don't want to. They want to invest in their platform and in their customers, in their value proposition. And we're going to build the connectivity behind them. So, I mean, I'll just sort of wrap up by talking about, you know, why now? You know, why is now a good time to innovate and transform? I think it's just, as we all know, the world has just sort of radically changed within the last 3 months, 3 or 4 months, and certainly what we're hearing from software vendors, from estate agents, conveyancers, lenders, is that this concept of connectivity, of digital transformation has moved on. It's moved on from being a kind of customer service nicety. Wouldn't it be an awesome digital experience if the consumer can track the journey all the way along? If they get real-time automated alerts, if you've got secure document exchange and secure messaging between platforms. And that's still true, but actually it's become a business resilience must. This ability of applications to talk to each other, this ability of to take humans out, you know, go back to the, you know, in the organization, that onboarding process that used to take 2-3 weeks and it always went wrong. It went wrong not because HR or IT were delinquent. It went wrong because the systems didn't talk. We were relying on individual people to do these low-level tasks, and whilst the machines can now do it and the applications talk to each other. It's the same in the marketplace. The property marketplace is a very well understood set of processes and set of events that have to happen over a period of time. And we can't be relying on face-to-face contact and telephone and email. The applications can talk to each other. The technology is there to make them talk to each other. And now is the time to really digitize the UK property market and really take out a whole load of cost for everyone involved, the consumers, the businesses, and allow trade to really flow freely and allow home moving to go from something that's horrid in 6 months to something that's really seamless and slick, where the software that runs the market is fully connected. And we're hoping, you know, with our software partners to play a big part in the digital transformation of the UK property market. So yeah, that's my sort of reflections on DLT and the UK property market.
What is a pushback from this being rolled out?
Do you know, David, the truth is that there hasn't been any pushback. I think what's happened historically is people who have an interest in one, so let's say you're a software provider that is currently providing a CRM system for estate agents or conveyancing or a part of the market. And then you say, oh, by the way, we're creating a network to help the other software providers connect up. There's going to be a concern around that. And I think also there's been multiple attempts to build a kind of a platform that will rule all platforms. But you speak to anyone on the front line in estate agents, conveyancers, they use this concept called portal fatigue. they really don't want a swivel chair and have to key into another thing. So we've been very clear that our value proposition is literally the connectivity layer. We do not have relationships with the end businesses. We do not compete with the software vendors. We help them to enhance their proposition. And the truth is we have more demand than we can actually cope with. And one of the things we're working on internally is how can we accelerate the connectivity of software vendors, because it's overwhelming. People really do want to now connect up and digitize, and there has been literally no pushback yet.
Are you aiming to provide the MuleSoft style API integration layer for properties?
And that's probably a good analogy, but so you probably use that within an organization. What we're doing is it's as an analogy, it's a really good analogy, and we're using Corda to execute that proposition. And what that allows us to do is leave the data with the actual software vendors. So if you're using a software package today, you trust your software provider to look after your data. They have it, and that's where it will stay. And then you, through using that software, will be able to send that data to another software platform. So the type of data that you send over email today, you will send peer-to-peer.
Cool, thank you. On that note that you mentioned Corda, are you looking at any alternatives, or are there any alternatives being considered, such as from IBM Hyperledger or any other blockchain platforms?
Yeah, we did that research quite some time ago, and it was a really in-depth and detailed piece of work. We have been building on Corda since sort of middle of 2018. We've gone through 2 POCs and a pilot, and the technology is just really robust. It does exactly what we wanted to do. And the thing for us, within the home moving process, one of the really key elements is the mortgage and that financial piece. It is without doubt the blockchain of choice for financial institutions. So no, there's no plans to change off Corda.
Is Coadjute only focused on the real estate transactions, or is there an appetite to expand the product suite to include things such as tokenization, such as fractional real estate, and maybe valuation for estate agencies and mortgage lenders, similar to what Zoopla and Rightmove offer, but using DLT?
So the short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is, it's fascinating when you sort of enter this world of collaboration between software partners. So many ideas come up of how when you begin to work together, you can think about identity. We have another partner who's looking at tokenization, etc. So I think what you'll see is you'll just see these services that are DLT enabled coming together. But for Coadjute, we want to be really laser focused on the transaction piece, but we will interact and interoperate with service providers offering other services.
Mm-hmm. Do you foresee the Coadjute platform becoming mainstream within the UK real estate community? And we've already asked this, but if there's any impediments to this going forward?
So we've just completed the UK pilot. We're now hardening the platform ready for production launch in Q1. So we're going to go live in January. As I said, the actual demand building up, we have a huge pipeline of people who want to join. We were thinking of one type of launch plan, but now we're looking at actually we're going to have to have a sandbox and have an ability for people just to self-serve and connect. So I think by this time next year, we will have a significant number of software vendors connected in and transacting on the platform. And I think from there the network effect will kick in, because software vendors and their customers are demanding connectivity now. Email is no longer fit for purpose.
Christoph has stated that a public ledger is immutable, a private one is not, and why not save your data on a private database and save a digital footprint on the public chain so you can guarantee nobody has tampered with your private data without actually revealing the data? So it's a question about why you've chosen to structure as you have.
Yeah, I mean, there's some awesome work being done with public networks. So I'm not sort of private permissioned against public platforms. The baseline protocol, which I've been looking at, not very deeply, but I have been looking at some really exciting work that they're doing. Exactly that. I think what they're doing is they're looking at ERP systems and they're kind of baselining a record. So like you send someone an invoice or a purchase order, and you baseline the value of the purchase order, and the two systems can then stay in sync along that. So I think the mainnet and public platforms for time stamping some immutable things, that's useful. That's not what we're solving for, though. We're not trying to solve for the immutability of data per se. What we're trying to solve for is transaction efficiency between software applications. So the enterprise-grade Corda system, it does it. It does the use case. We've been through the pilot, the customers, the businesses, and everyone involved said, wow, that just solves the problem. So there isn't a kind of data tampering. That's not the problem we're solving. We're trying to keep multiple systems synchronized. That's the problem we're solving, and our solution really does that.
Well, thank you. Oliver is asking, what's the relationship between R3 and Coadjute?
Well, we're partners. So we've been with R3 since back in 2018, and we work out their offices. We've been entrepreneurs and residents. So yeah, we're absolutely very, very close partners.
Cool, thank you. Morgan has asked, what sort of time saving does the Coadjute platform potentially offer in place of current processes, which can take months to complete, especially with a long chain?
Yeah, so we probably have 3 data points, so to speak, on this. So we did a piece of work with the Land Registry where it was a POC, but they used a real property transaction. Mm-hmm. So what they did was take a buyer who'd been through the process normally and see how long that would take, mm-hmm. and then did it on the DLT platform. And the DLT platform, it took something like less than a week, because the systems are all synchronized. When we did the global trial, our analysis off the back of that, we showed that you could get the transaction down from months to 2 weeks. Having said that, the speed of the transaction will undoubtedly decrease because there's a lot of time spent chasing around, phoning around, etc. But I don't think we necessarily need to get to Amazon-esque, one-click purchase, because I don't think that's really what anybody wants in the property industry. People, it's a huge purchase, and people like to be considered about it. So maybe you would never want to purchase a property in a day, or maybe you never want to purchase it in a week. So the technology, once the systems are joined up, could automatically pretty much be real time between the systems. But there are business and legal process, and there's time for consideration, time for reflection. So I would say practically, if you wanted to get to a situation where you move home in maybe 3 or 4 weeks, then this technology joining up the systems will make that possible.
I've got a question for you. In terms of getting acceptance for Coadjute with the public, with estate agents, with all the different parties, how did you go about doing that and explaining what it was and raising awareness for the platform?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Erica, and it's certainly been a long journey, and it's been a journey of learning. I think like many blockchain companies, you back in those sort of emerging, when things were emerging and thinking was emerging, you take a mindset to it the same as we took to building, a platform, Facebook, anything like that, LinkedIn, or any piece of enterprise mm-hmm. software. But then you begin to realize that actually with DLT, you're not building a vertical application. The true value is the horizontal nature of it. And therefore you've got 2 choices. You either build applications for each piece of the horizontal value chain that you're solving for, mm-hmm. or you work with a software provider. So I think we started, as I think everybody did, at the end with buyers and sellers and estate agents and conveyancers and mortgage lenders. And I think we realized, and we had the privilege of working with the Land Registry Digital Street community. So I think whilst we were in that phase, we were really looking at the end user value of the system. So we had lots of conversations there. What we've realized over time is that DLT really is a network technology. It really is a means of joining up existing software. And therefore now we work with software providers that already have 15-year relationships in each one of the verticals we want to solve, mm-hmm. so we want to serve. So yeah, we've probably, it's probably been a three-pronged attack. It's been, we've been out on social media, we've been talking to people about thought leadership around how the market can be digitized and transformed. We spend a lot of time talking to property businesses, conveyance estate agent lenders, and then we spend a lot of time working very closely with the software vendors. So we've probably taken that three-pronged attack into learning, listening, and communicating at those three levels: software vendor, business, and consumer.
Great, thank you. John is asking, was a pilot program or trial, is that moving from months to 2 weeks, done with a real property transaction or a simulated property? And was there more than one property involved? He's also saying, thank you from New York and great discussion.
Thank you, that's very kind. Yes, so there were two done. So one at the Land Registry was, they took a real property transaction that had happened. So it happened through the normal process, and then they simulated that through their solution. So it had all of the characteristics of a real transaction. It was a real transaction, but it was run through a simulated process. So that was that one. The recent UK pilot we did, it was what we called an MVP. We had a software vendor across each one of the verticals connected in, and we used NatWest. And what we did was we created 15 transactions and we ran them through the system. So we were using not the live environments of the software vendors, but the test environments. But nonetheless, we were using the software integrated. We were setting people up on the estate agency software. We had the mobile application for the consumer. We had 15 people involved in the trial who had been through the home moving process in the last 6 months, and we gave them the property, they had the mortgage, all the rest of it. So it wasn't a real transaction, but it was real data, real consumers, real software. We ran it end to end. And again, software-wise, you can crunch that down to under a week. Practically, how fast the market would want to operate, and that would be a sort of business decision, so to speak.
What's next for you? Obviously, you're based in the UK. Plans to operate in other countries or for international property transactions, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in the UK at the moment. We're in the process of closing a funding round, and at least two of our investors are international. So very much we believe that from our global trial, we did a global trial, and we learned that the problem is more prominent in different geographies. So the UK is not the worst. It's about, I think on the world league table, it's about 41 out of 200 countries, and one being the best, easiest to buy a property, and I think it's 198 actually being the worst. So it's a global problem, and in and around the 41, the sort of UK, you have Canada, the States, Australia, etc. You have countries like Germany and France, which are pretty poor, really down the rankings. So our belief is that the actual core data model, the transaction engine, and the application that we've built is transferable to jurisdictions. And then you bring it to another jurisdiction, and like any sort of enterprise software product, you then have to do the local customization. So we're going to get live in the UK in January. We'll be focused very heavily next year on rolling out in the UK, and then we'll start expanding from there.
What about countries that don't have a land reg yet?
Well, it's a really great question, Erica, because I think there's actually kind of two distinct buckets. I think there's the UK, where we don't have a problem with land registry, right? We're very confident in the land registry to keep titles safe. So you don't expect to get home, I don't expect to get home and have somebody else sitting in our house saying, we own this house now. But I think there's lots of jurisdictions in the world where there are problems with land registry. And back to the question from one of the people with us this afternoon, in those environments, I think blockchain can solve a different problem, and it's a really important problem. I was in Washington last year at the World Bank Land Registration Conference, and I sat in on lots of presentations from African countries, and some of the stories you hear, are truly shocking. And there's real issues with property title, property ownership. So I think in jurisdictions where there is a risk, and there is a risk of fraud, you don't have that sort of ring of steel around the land register. Blockchain's got a huge potential there in terms of actually putting the register on a blockchain and being able to have that immutability and that history that's there for all time of who owned it, and it can't be corrupted and it can't be changed. So I think that's different to what we're doing, but absolutely I can see the value in that.
Is there any other company trying to do something similar to what you're doing?
Not that we're aware of. I mean, I think there are companies who have tried historically to build portals and sort of centralized platform, but we're focused on the back end infrastructure. I think there are companies doing what we're doing in lots of other markets, insurance, trade finance, etc. Obviously shipping, but within property, we're not aware of any. But
are there plans to leverage this process to help to bridge to tokenization of real estate investment?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that comes up a lot.
There's been a number of projects trying to do things around tokenization of real estate.
Tokenization. So what is tokenization? It can sort of manifest itself in lots of different ways. So let's just assume what we're saying in tokenization is buy an asset. So how that happens today, I'm not an expert on this, but how that happens today is, you put some sort of REIT around it, you put some sort of legal wrapper around it, maybe you set up a company, the company then owns the property, and then you can buy shares in that company, or you could buy all the shares in that company, and therefore you've got the ownership of the property. So there was a lot of research done by JLL and a number of funds in the States, and they said they didn't see a use case for tokenizing real estate. And the reason they came up with that is because they said, well, okay, what are you trying to solve? If you're trying to take out the friction from so you can't, the record of ownership of the property sits with the land registry, right? So that's a given. So unless you're going to get rid of the land registry is the default ownership. And so in the UK, if you want to tokenize a piece of real estate, it's not possible at the moment unless you put some sort of wrapper around it. So you end up with a REIT. And then you're saying, right, well, okay, so with that REIT, can I therefore remove friction from that? And what JLL worked out was something like, yes, you might be able to make a 5% saving on the cost of transacting that REIT, but it doesn't warrant the investment in infrastructure and marketing and. So all I know is that people who've really looked at that have said, tokenizing real estate, they haven't found a value case right now. I'm not saying there isn't one, I'm not an expert on it, but I haven't seen one come to the fore. Conversely, they've said property transacting, which is what we're doing, and optimizing workflow is a very valuable use case. But I think there has to be something in this tokenization piece because so many people are looking at it. I just haven't seen a sort of live flourishing service as yet.
Morgan is asking, will we see Coadjute at the virtual Cordacon this year? Now, I'm rather hoping that Cordacon was one thing, but the Christmas party at Sushi Samba was very memorable. So I'm rather hoping that at least is in real life, maybe optimistic.
Yeah, me too. I did see something from Boris yesterday saying the country was going to be back to normal by Christmas. So it would be great to have the Christmas party again.
Of course, everybody believes every word that comes from Bojo.
Well, exactly. So we'll see. We can remain optimistic, but in terms of Cordacon, yes, definitely we'll be there.
Right. Going slightly off piece, but obviously you've been working in the property industry and looking at sort of how technology is being used in the UK property industry. Are there any other trends that you see being adopted in terms of how the UK property industry will change with technology, with innovation, with trends, or even with this digitalization that we're now seeing with the coronavirus lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, we see that there's a sort of convergence around blockchain and AI. And it's really interesting, if you think about a property transaction today, and if I was, if you were to buy a house and I was saying, can you show me what happened? It's not possible. Nobody knows what happened because the data is trapped within emails and sort of telephone calls. So what we've got on our platform out of the pilot project is you can see spanning across these different CRM and operational systems, the events that happened during the transaction. Now that data now becomes something that can be used as BI reports and analytics to help the businesses involved in the property transaction to improve, because you're moving away from it being anecdotal, like, moving back to the onboarding and employee thing where you're saying, oh, if only the HR department or this form wasn't sent or that happened. Well, now in organizations, we've got workflow, we've got management reports, we know what goes on, and we can optimize that. And the same within marketplaces. Once we get the data extracted onto a shared ledger, at least the events, when the events happened, then you can run AI, you can run analytics across that, so you can sort of look back at what happened, but also you can run predictive analytics looking forward. So you're in a property transaction and you might be in a chain of 3 or 4 transactions, and you can say, we can see this pattern emerging down here. So Erica, I know you think you're moving in on this date, but we predict it's going to be that date based on history. And by the way, this is the interventions and actions. So I think we'll see the convergence of DLT, predictive analytics, and AI as we move forward and roll out. I suppose more directly in terms of COVID, and I know someone actually in Coadjute has just been through selling their property, and they went through the whole 3D virtual viewing piece. It worked really well, and it was bought without anyone visiting the house at all. So
that's incredible and slightly insane.
yeah, incredible and slightly insane. But that is really happening now. So there's a lot of people there saying that the lockdown and COVID has moved the property industry. Happened in 3 months what would have taken 3 years, and I think that's through digital viewings and all that type of stuff.
Cool. One other question. You've obviously talked about the sales side of transactions and all the paperwork, which I know is an absolute nightmare and takes forever. But also on the property rental side, if you, for example, go for an agent to rent a property, there's still a lot of disputes or often uncertainty about who has to pay what, or are tenants paying the right fees, or about the inventory and so forth. And there's been a lot of dispute about some of the agents that are more or less scrupulous. Is there anything that you think could be done for the letting side of the paperwork and transactions? Granted, that's not to do with land registry, but to simplify the paperwork there.
Yeah, for sure. I say we're laser focused right now on the sales transaction. However, having said that, all of the software companies we're dealing with on the estate agency side, they all have 2 parts to their business. They've got the sale and the lettings piece, and all estate agencies kind of have that mixed to their business. So yes, I can see once people start, it's like creating any network really. Once you create a network and you connect up software systems, and if you're connecting up software systems that happen to do sales and lettings, I think the users of those systems will come up with new innovations and new ideas of how they can, better serve. You can immediately see that if somebody was letting a property and then they're moving to the next property, being able to transfer that history and that record from one system to another seamlessly, identity information, payments information. There's a whole bunch of, I think, opportunities we haven't explored, but I think the software providers, once they are connected, will start to explore that. And we're building an open network, so we're really comfortable with people coming in and building applications and saying, hey, we want to sort out lettings, and we want to use this digital backbone to do that, and we're pretty sure that will happen.
Thank you very much, John, for joining us, to everyone for joining, and for people coming in from all the way from New York. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you soon.